Hey everyone, and welcome back to my On Reflection series, where every single week I break down my 3 favorite lessons from the podcast guest that's been on the show earlier in the week. Before we get into this episode, I have a huge favor to ask all of you, and that is to press the like, follow, and subscribe button because you have no idea how much your support means to me and how often it gets shared with other people so that I get more inspiring, incredible, and engaging guests on this episode that I can learn from and hopefully you all can learn from too. This week, I sat down with Sahil Bloom, and honestly, I feel like he's just a wise old soul. And I have so many lessons that I want to share with you, but I'm going to pick my top 3. And my first is, you may not be in a job that connects to your purpose or allows you to live your purpose, but whatever it is in your job, you can always find something to connect you to your purpose. Now, what I mean by that, Sahil and I spoke about, if you've watched the full episode, a lot around purpose, how you find it, how you find a job that aligns with it. And he shared his own personal story of burning himself out in the financial sector and then one day realizing this is exactly what I don't want. And I really love that Sahil shared his own journey with that, because I think so many of us are struggling with knowing what we really want. And it only takes one conversation or one big thing to happen for us to all do a U-turn. And I think I really felt that as well when I was in my corporate job. I always just thought that I was never going to be good at anything. I thought I was super average. I just thought, okay, well, this is who I am because I'm in this field and I don't enjoy it. I don't find it passionate. I don't find it fulfilling. And therefore, I'm just not going to be able to do anything that I like because this is the only thing that I know. And what I really love what Sahil said was that everyone's purpose is very, very different. And he gave the example of someone whose purpose it was to really look after their family. And he said that he had a conversation with someone and they were saying, yes, my job isn't something that I love to do, but it allows me to look after my family. And that is my purpose. So even though he wasn't in a job that he really loved, he made sure that he connected his job to his purpose, and that's what allowed him to be continuously growing within his role. And I think this is a really important lesson because I think, especially with social media and everything that we see online, we think that everyone lives a life that they love, and it's really easy to do that, and everyone does it in their 20s or their 30s. But there's people who find their purpose in their 50s or their 60s, and there's people who never ever get to have a job that's aligned with their purpose. But we can always find something within our role or within our lives that links us to our purpose. And I really loved how he said this because it's so empowering. It brings everything back into our own perspective, and it gives us the control of our own lives. So my 2 questions for you. What skills, what lessons, what connections do you have in your current role that you don't realize are helping you towards your purpose? And instead of resenting where you are, how can you create a bridge from where you are and where you want to be? And here it's really important to think about, okay, there's things that I don't really like, but where do I want to go? And that's where I really talk about the power of visualization, because it's so important to understand where you want to go in order to close that bridge up. These 2 questions are really, really powerful because they allow you to do it right now in this moment. You do not have to wait to do these. You can do it right now, feel empowered, feel more positive, and feel really grateful for the position you're in today. My second key lesson that Sahil taught me was wealth isn't just about money, it's about so many different things. Now, in his book, he mentions the 5 types of wealth, and that's actually what his book is called, and we talk through it a lot in detail in the podcast. But one of the things that I really wanted to talk about was time. And the reason why I want to talk about time is because he mentioned that so many of us do not think about time until the moment we don't have it. So many of us do not think about how we're spending our time, how we're choosing to be with people in our time, what we're doing with our time. We just do the same things over and over and over again, and we don't realize that time is actually within our control. Sahil also shared an amazing example of taking his son to a pool on a Monday or Tuesday afternoon. And he said that that's when he realized that this was the real luxury of life. Not when he made loads of money, not when he got all these accolades, but when he was able to do something that most people aren't able to do because they're restricted by their jobs, they're restricted by their commitments, they're restricted by so many other things. And he said that being able to do that on a random Tuesday afternoon, just because his son felt like it, really allowed him to see that the time and the freedom is the things that we should be focusing on. I also had a similar reflection last week when I was walking past a coffee shop. I actually shared a post about this on Instagram if you don't follow me on there. But I shared a post where I was walking past a coffee shop and I just thought, I would just really love to sit there and brainstorm for a couple of hours. And then I paused and thought, wait, why don't I do that? So I walked in, I brainstormed there for like 3 hours. I had thought of so many amazing ideas, not just for this podcast, but for so many other things that I do in my life. And I felt so grateful and so happy in that moment because I thought so much of the time I thought that quitting my job would mean that I'd have so much free time. And I always thought, well, I don't. But I think it's also because it was my perspective on like, I have to do X, X, and X. But on that day, I was like, I don't have to do anything. I'm in control of my time. The only person that's going to tell me off is me. So of course I had to make sure my meetings were done and everything else was done. But I had a whole afternoon free and I thought, I can do that. You know, I've given myself this permission to quit my job, to go off, to do something really risky so that I can do these things. And so that moment meant so much to me. So I really, really resonated with Sahil's moment of taking his son to the pool on a Tuesday afternoon too. So often, so many of us chase financial success because we think that's what's going to buy us happiness. But true happiness is actually freedom. To be present with the people we love, to create a life on our terms, to be able to say yes and no to things that we really want to do, that is actually the best feeling in the whole world. And I think one that so many of us crave. And something he mentioned in the podcast is money is only valuable if it allows us to do that. He was talking about some of his friends as well in the podcast, and he said that he has these friends who make so much money per year, but they cannot make the time in their lives to be flexible to do things with their family or their friends. If they do not work that hard, they will not get that money. So it's really important when you're thinking about what you want to do, how can you build some flexibility into your life while still making the money or the income that you would want? And here it's really important. I think everybody would love to say, oh, I would want to make more money or the same money, but do you really need it? Are you making time for the other things in your life? Is your wealth actually spread out in all the 5 areas of your life that Sahil talks about? So my 2 reflection questions for you. If money wasn't an issue, what would your ideal day look like? This can be a really, really powerful exercise for really understanding what you truly want. I did this in my workshop in January as well, and I think it's so important to be alone when you do this exercise because we can be clouded and muddled with other people's opinions or other people's voices. And often if we do it with our partner, we're thinking about their needs. If we do it with our friends, we're thinking about what they would want to do. If we do it with our family, we're thinking about what's best for them. But what would your ideal day look like if money wasn't an issue? And then what I want you to do is circle one of those things that you can do next week. Just one tiny element that you can start to create next week so you can start to build your ideal day and over time, your ideal week. And then the second question is how can you start to structure your life to create small freedoms in there? Just really small actions that allow you to feel free, that allow you to do things on your terms, that allow you to say no, that allow you to do things on your terms, that allow you to do things that you truly want to do. And unfortunately, this is going to be hard because you're going to have to say no to certain things. But doing that dream day exercise, followed by that question, is a really, really powerful thing because you yourself will start to realize, hey, this is what I really want. And maybe I am going to have to say no and I'm going to be okay with it. I think saying no to something that we don't even know that we really want to go to or not can feel really daunting or overwhelming. But when you're so sure of yourself, when you're so sure of your own opinion, saying no doesn't feel rude. Saying no doesn't feel mean. I feel like I'm being selfish by saying yes because I know that I'm not being my true self. So those 2 prompts are really, really powerful. I'm so excited to hear if you guys try that. Let me know what one element of your dream day is next week. The third point, which I think is so important, is that Sahil said that things that you once prayed for are now your blessings. And he gave the most amazing example here. He said that earlier on in his marriage, he was really struggling with fertility. And I know from the conversations I have with so many people that I speak to about this podcast, so many people that I have offline, my friends, my family, that there are so many people out there who have struggled with their fertility journey. And he said that all he ever dreamed of was having a child. All he ever wanted was to have a child with his wife. And when he had one, he was the happiest person in the whole world. And then he reflected back and said, a couple of weeks ago, I was working and my son came in and he was just being mischievous. He was just being his usual self. Like he's only little. So he was being a little bit naughty. He was like playing with all his work stuff. He was like moving everything around. And Sahil was feeling really frustrated. He was feeling really annoyed. And he said in that moment, he realized like, God, I'm feeling so agitated. I'm getting so annoyed with my son. But this is what I dreamed of. I wanted to have a child so much. And this is what a child does. This is what a child is. And that reframe, I think, is so, so, so powerful because it applies to something I spoke about in one of my earlier episodes when I said, so many of us want things, but we are not willing to cope with the things that it comes with. So many of us want a promotion, but are we ready for all the responsibility? So many of us want children, but are we ready for the disruption that they might cause sometimes? These are just normal things that happen. And I think so often we desperately want something, but we don't realize what it involves. And that really made me think that so often when we want something so much, we forget about all those other things, whether that's a promotion, whether that's a bigger house where, you have to have a bigger mortgage and you have to work harder and you have sleepless nights and you have all these worries. It's so easy to think of the bigger picture without understanding everything that's underneath it. But I thought this was an amazing way that Sahil reflected on his own experiences. He was incredibly vulnerable in sharing that. And I think it will resonate with a lot of parents out there today. I think it also applies to so many things, whether that's your job, whether that's where you live, whether that's who your friends are, whether that's what you do every single day, whether that's even like going to a Pilates class. Sometimes I always think like, oh God, I can't be bothered to go. And then I think back and think, God, one day I just dreamed of being able to walk out of my flat in London and walk to a Pilates class and then come home and make myself a matcha. Like that is a dream that I once wished for. And so I think it's a really, really lovely thing that Sahil said. I think it applies to so many of us, even if you don't have children. And I have 2 journal prompts for you. The first is, what do you have in your life right now that you desperately once wished for? And this really links to the first question. When you identified your dream day, are you doing something that you once dreamed and wished for? Is something that you're already doing part of your dream day? It's a really nice way to look at your calendar, look at your week, look at the last month and think, did I wish for any of these things? It really allows you to go into this state of gratitude and really appreciate the things that you have in life, because so often we forget. So often we forget that the life we live now was the life that we once planned for 5 years ago. It was the life we wished for when we were kids. It was something that we could only have hoped for. And it's very easy to forget these small things, but they really, really matter. And my second question is, how can you shift your current struggles and see them as hidden blessings? The truth is, so often when we're going through something, we're stuck in this horrible state. And only when we reflect and look back do we say, oh, maybe that was a good thing. Oh, this happened for this reason. And I used to always think, okay, well, obviously you're going to look at the positive in hindsight. But I mean, what's the alternative? To look at the negative, not to see the positives, not to see the blessings, not to see the lessons, not to see how it's changed you positively? These 2 questions have been so important for my personal development and growth, and I really hope that they've helped you too. I think what I really loved about my podcast with Sahil is he said fulfillment isn't a destination, it's the journey. We might not always love where we are, but we can definitely find purpose and fulfillment in the process. And I really love that he wrote this book. It's really important for so many of us not to constantly think about the importance of money and success in our careers. And this is also why I talk about 5 different areas of your life when I'm goal setting. It's not just about your career, it's about your health. It's about your hobbies. It's about your relationship. It's about your personal development. All of these 5 things are so important when you're setting goals, because if you only set goals for your career, you'll miss all these other fundamental parts of life and you won't be happy. And I think Sahil really deep dives this into his book, and he has loads of illustrations and loads of amazing examples. So I'd really recommend getting his brand new book, 5 Types of Wealth. Thank you so much for watching another On Reflection series. I really love doing these solo episodes just because they help me to really understand what the podcast guest is saying, really take in exactly how I can apply it into my real life. And these journal prompts are also great ways for you to reflect on the podcast throughout the week. Next week, I have a really amazing podcast all around visualization. So if you want to know how you can visualize correctly, the power of visualization and how it can help you in your life today, make sure your bell notifications are on, make sure you're subscribed so you're the first one to watch this episode on Tuesday. Have an amazing weekend, and I will see you on the full podcast on Tuesday.